The 2024 US presidential election is heating up, and people all around the world are watching closely. Will Trump make a comeback, or is the US about to see its first female president ever? Who's going to enter the White House? Maybe these 11 key factors will be the deciding factors in the US election. The US election has always been about winning the economy to win the world. So, economic policy is the big issue on voters' minds in this presidential election. The price of a dozen eggs has shot up from $1.55 to $2.72, almost doubling. Grain prices have jumped by 25% and fruit and veggie prices are up 14%. Housing rent has climbed by 24% and house prices have skyrocketed by 50%. Gas prices have also taken a big hike. The rising cost of living has made fighting inflation the top priority for the Biden administration. Harris has summed up her economic policy as the opportunity economy. Just like Obama called healthcare reform Obamacare, it's a slogan meant to click with voters. Harris says the opportunity economy is all about cutting living costs, ensuring economic security, and letting economic resources flow across generations, helping folks get a shot at market competition. At the same time, Harris rolled out plans to control food prices. She wants to give new powers to the Federal Trade Commission and state attorneys general to investigate corporate misconduct and hit them with strict penalties. This would be the first federal ban on corporate price gouging in history. In this presidential race, Trump has pitched that the federal government will take action to cap car insurance and energy prices. Unlike Harris's rules aimed at protecting the middle and lower classes, Trump's approach is more about helping big corporations, longtime backers of the Republican Party. The American auto industry will gain from lower insurance costs, and energy companies will get to tap into domestic oil and gas, grabbing a bigger market slice. Trump puts more faith in market mechanisms and vows to cut regulations, saying, "This way, all prices will go down, not up." Of course, he hasn't forgotten his trade protectionism promise, planning to hike the average tariff level to 20% to bring manufacturing back to the US and create more jobs. On the trade front, Trump voiced his support for slapping a 10% tariff on all imports with plans to bump this up later. Trump also aims to hit all Chinese imports with a 60% tariff. Harris and Trump's foreign strategies are pretty different. One's all about values and alliances, while the other is more about what the world can do for the US. But surprisingly, there are some overlaps in their foreign policies. During Trump's time in office, he took a more confrontational approach to China than previous presidents, even though his actions weren't as tough as his words. The current Harris administration talks less aggressively about China, but is tougher in action, like banning tech exports to China and slapping high tariffs on electric cars from China. When it comes to foreign issues, two big ones are the Russia-Ukraine conflict and the Middle East situation. In the Middle East, even though Harris is under pressure from her party to cut arms supplies to Israel, she hasn't let Trump get ahead with right-wing statements. She's also not rushing to bring back the deal with Iran that Trump ditched. She recently called Iran America's #1 enemy. Biden's support for Israel has caused some Arab American voters and other minority groups who usually support Democrats to rethink their stance. Even 25% of black voters are hesitant to fully back Harris. Trump has also made his position clear on this. He said the Middle East situation could blow up into a devastating global war. "If I were still in office, Iran wouldn't even think of attacking Israel," Trump claimed, adding that if he gets back to the White House, we will have a peaceful world. On supporting Ukraine, Harris and Trump really diverge. Harris's administration has been leading Western efforts to help Ukraine stand up to Russia. As long as Congress is on board, she'll keep sending weapons and money to Ukraine if she wins. Trump, on the other hand, said the $60 billion aid to Ukraine is a bad deal. He claimed that if he were in charge, a call to Russian President Putin could end the conflict in 24 hours. He's basically telling voters he won't spend their tax dollars on Ukraine. Trump didn't say how he'd end the war and wouldn't reveal which side he wants to win, raising concerns he might push Ukraine to settle on Russia's terms. Harris said in her election paper a new direction for the middle-class agenda that she's going to subsidize high-quality childcare and preschool education. This plan will bump up spending by $3.7 trillion over 10 years. Trump, on the flip side, said if he gets re-elected, he's going to shut down the U.S. Department of Education. He mentioned that one of his main moves would be to close the Department of Education and return everything to the states. He added, "In 50 states, I bet 35 would do very well." Some of these places are managed very poorly, but, it would almost force them to manage better. They might not do well initially, but it won't be worse than it is now, he added. Since the 2016 presidential campaign, Trump has been thinking about getting rid of the Department of Education. While he was president, his administration suggested merging the Department of Education and the Department of Labor into one big federal agency as part of a bigger plan to shake up the government. This plan needed Congress to sign off and never fully happened. Trump also tried to slash billions from the Department of Education's budget while he was in office. When it comes to abortion, Trump sees the Supreme Court's decision to remove constitutional protection for abortion rights as his achievement. But to win over female voters, even though he still opposes abortion, he's softened his stance a bit. He said he doesn't support a nationwide abortion ban and thinks the decision should be up to individual states. Harris, on the flip side, is totally against abortion bans and wants to bring back constitutional protection for women's abortion rights in the U.S. She said that after Roe v. Wade was overturned, the Biden-Harris administration has been leading the charge for abortion rights. As a candidate, she slammed the Hyde Amendment, which Biden used to support. This amendment stops federal money from being used for most abortion procedures. Harris also took a shot at the Trump abortion ban, saying, "Trump shouldn't be telling women what to do with their bodies." She said, "Trying to make people believe this could happen and making women think this way is just wrong and insulting. This guy is full of lies." Even though Trump keeps saying he's a protector of women, Harris reminded everyone that he's also the one who said women who have abortions should be punished. Building on the plan to keep cutting taxes for families with a bunch of kids, Harris announced on September 4th that the tax exemption threshold for small and medium-sized businesses is going up from $5,000 to $50,000. She also plans to keep most of the tax cuts Trump signed in 2017, only bumping up the tax rate for folks making over $400,000. Harris also said she'd roll out a $6,000 tax credit for families with newborns under 1-year-old and bring back the child tax credit for caregivers to $3,600, like it was during the pandemic. Trump's tax plan is more all-encompassing. He thinks the corporate tax rate should drop to 15%, way lower than the 28% Harris is talking about. He also wants personal income tax rates to keep going down. Even though almost everyone would get some tax break, the big tax cut plan naturally helps the wealthy more. When it comes to domestic taxes, Trump wants to slash all tax rates, make the 2017 tax policies permanent, and cut corporate taxes even more. He believes the corporate tax rate should go down to 15%, way below Harris's 28%. Personal income tax rates should keep decreasing too. While almost everyone would get some tax relief, the wide-ranging tax cut plan mostly benefits the rich. The Federal Budget Accountability Committee says Trump's plan would double the national debt increase compared to Harris's plan. After taking office, Biden initially eased up on Trump's immigration policies, which led to a big jump in illegal immigrants at the U.S.-Mexico border. In this year's presidential election, Harris and the Democrats are pushing for comprehensive immigration reform. She said she still backs the most conservative bipartisan reform proposal we've seen this century, which includes shutting down asylum applications during big waves of illegal immigrants. Harris mentioned that Congress has put forward a border security bill she supports. This bill would add 1,500 agents at the border to stop fentanyl from coming into the U.S. When it comes to immigration, Trump's even more extreme than he was in 2016. He's always been against immigration, even saying in a debate with Harris that illegal immigrants would eat people's pets. His ideas about deporting illegal immigrants and building a border wall have gotten a lot of support from white conservative groups. Trump also slammed the Democrats for loosening up on illegal immigration to win votes. Lots of illegal immigrants come into the U.S., and the Democrats try to get them to vote. They don't even speak English or know where they are. That's why the Democrats let them into our country. In this year's presidential race, Trump promised to crack down hard on illegal immigration and carry out the biggest deportation of undocumented immigrants in U.S. history. Trump's repeatedly said that illegal immigrants are poisoning the blood of our country, and in some cases, illegal immigrants are not people, but animals. When it comes to housing, Harris has a dual approach to cut costs by boosting the housing supply and lightening the load on homebuyers. She's talking about building 3 million new homes over the next 4 years. There's also a plan to set up a $40 billion federal fund to push new home construction while upping tax credits for developers of affordable housing. Harris wants to give the Federal Trade Commission more power to tackle price collusion between property owners and landlords. Plus, she's offering first-time homebuyers $25,000 in down payment help and tax credits. Trump's campaign team is pitching the idea of building up to 10 new cities through fair competition and opening more federal land for new home construction. Economists backing Trump say that even though deficits went up during his presidency, he'd keep federal spending in check and lower interest rates if he gets elected again. Trump's team isn't on board with Harris's plan to build apartments in suburbs and cities. In his campaign speeches, Trump said his housing policy is all about cutting interest rates and inflation and giving tax breaks to first-time homebuyers. He also mentioned he'd stop housing benefits for illegal immigrants and use that money to provide housing for homeless veterans. When it comes to climate and energy policy, Harris is pretty much on the same page as Biden. Throughout her career, she's always said that developing clean energy and keeping environmental justice front and center are top priorities. 4 years ago, when Biden picked Harris as his running mate, he highlighted her tough stance against big oil companies during her time in California. Last year, Harris made her first appearance at international climate talks, announcing a $3 billion contribution to the Green Climate Fund and giving her first big international speech on climate issues. As vice president, Harris has also been involved in pushing the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency's policies to tackle long-standing environmental justice problems, like supporting plans to spend billions nationwide to replace lead pipes and lead-based paint. Harris's views in this area clash with Trump's. Based on what Trump has said publicly, his energy policy is all about ramping up oil production, bringing back the U.S. coal industry, promising energy independence, cutting down on reliance on OPEC countries, and scrapping Biden's electric vehicle directives on his first day in office. During his time in office from 2016 to 2020, Trump also slashed subsidies for clean energy and brought back support for fossil fuels. The U.S. presidential election isn't a straightforward one-person, one-vote deal. It's an indirect election carried out through representatives each state picks. Every state uses a winner-takes-all system, meaning all the electoral votes from a state go to the candidate who wins there. That's why swing states are a big deal in the campaign. Right now, the polling support for the two candidates in the 7 major swing states is super close, differing by just 2 to 3 percentage points. That's within the margin of error. According to an expert from Peking University, some swing states, even those considered the swing states among swing states, have nearly equal support for both candidates. In the end, a state's electoral votes might come down to just a few thousand popular votes. Pennsylvania and Wisconsin are examples of this. Wisconsin, with its 10 electoral votes, went to Trump in 2016 and flipped to Biden in 2020, with less than a 1 percentage point lead each time. So, everyone is trying to lock in even the smallest advantage and take advantage of any weaknesses their opponents have. Both parties are also trying to win over voters like industrial workers and Muslims. In North Carolina, the Republicans seem to have a bit of an edge. On one hand, recent hurricanes have hurt the Democratic campaign there. On the other hand, Democrats have only won the state twice in recent years. But in recent elections, the gap in Republican wins has gotten a lot smaller. The Democrats are aiming to win over the independent voters who moved to North Carolina because of its economic growth. Voter turnout really affects the election results. Usually, high turnout is good for the Democrats because they've got a big grassroots base, including minorities and undocumented immigrants. The Republicans, on the flip side, often push for stricter voting checks to cut down the number of voters. The fight over who gets to vote and how many people show up is super intense between the two parties. On October 31st, according to Forbes, the latest poll showed that Vice President and Democratic candidate Harris is ahead of former President and Republican candidate Trump by just 1%. But 10% of voters might change their minds before the election. The poll says Harris is currently leading Trump 49% to 48%, but things could change in the days leading up to the election because about 10% of potential voters and 16% of registered voters are still deciding. Also, in the 7 key swing states that could decide the whole election, Harris is leading Trump 49% to 48%. Just a week ago, Trump was leading Harris 50% to 46%. Who's going to make it to the White House? What do you think? Leave your comment below. If you like this video, please subscribe, like and share. This is News in a Minute.